I also want to say a very special thank you, not only to our wonderful guests and to Dr. Tom Rock, who's going to be moderating, but that we've been working in a collaborative fashion with his office and leadership and graduate GSLD, Graduate Student Life and Development, as well. But real quickly, a little over 10 years ago, a number of male students came in, Black male students came into my office, and they said, we need a little, there's not that many of us, and we think, and we need something to help. And in terms of doctoral students. So one thing led to the other. And we started first with the Black and Latin Male Doctoral Initiative, which of course is open to everybody, as everything is here at Teachers College. And it was a hit. Everybody came. And so we shifted the name a little bit, but we've been keeping it going. And the purpose of this is for everyone to have a sense of understanding about what does it take to get into a doctorate, to earn a doctorate. And we wanted to think about our master's students in particular as a cohort in some way. Not that everybody would be interested in coming to Teachers College to earn their doctorate, although that would be nice, but really to provide information initially for master's students to think about, even though they just got here, oh, what do I need to do? What is doctoral education all about? And so we would ask our closest colleagues to come and really talk with us and provide real information through the years. However, some faculty said to me, oh, you're doing this for master's students. What are you doing for the doctoral students that are already here? And so we developed an additional track, which is to provide information for those who are also in doctoral programs to think about the kinds of information they need in order to have a successful experience here at the college. So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Tom Rock, and he's going to moderate and introduce the panel. But also, Tom is really someone who has participated through the years in lots of conferences and presentations and so forth, so we thought it would be fitting to have him. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Rock.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Janice, for that lovely introduction, and thank you to Janice Robinson, the Office of the Vice President for Diversity and Community Affairs, and the Office of Graduate Student Life and Development for bringing this wonderful program together again. I do remember when this was first introduced. And I'm just so glad that this is just an annual tradition now that we do at Teachers College. It's really, really important to talk about the doctoral student journey, talk about some of the successes that you've all had with conferences and presentations, and just really positioning yourself for these wonderful, great opportunities. So I'm really excited about moderating this, and I know we have a super panel here that we've been just chatting a little bit and getting to know some of our students that are here. So really excited about that. I was going to say that, so I should probably reintroduce myself. So Tom Rock, so I oversee student affairs at Teachers College as the Associate Vice President and Chief Student Affairs Officer. I am an alum of Teachers College. I did my doctorate at Teachers College many, many, many years ago now. I can't believe how many years ago it's been. I would have loved a program like this when I was a doctoral student. And so I feel like it wasn't that long ago that I've forgotten that journey. And I think if there was something like this, I know I would have attended, I would have connected, and I would have really listened to some of the information that my fellow colleagues were talking about. So I think back then, though, it was a different time, right? And we found our support wherever we could. So I'm just so grateful that programs like this exist and that we're really showcasing some of the journey and some of the things that you all go through. So so without further ado, I would love to introduce the panel and or have you all introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then as we get into this session, I have some guiding questions that I would love to talk with, ask you about. And as with other panels, right, like we don't all need to answer every single question. We don't need to go like one down the row. That gets exhausting for participants, right? And it's like, you're like, okay, he's gonna ask another question. Every single person's gonna answer. But I'll throw out some questions and maybe the relevant person, and it might be that all of you want to answer the same one. That just might happen. But we'll see how it goes. I'll do our best to like keep it going and moderating this session. So let's see. So we have Kelly, Pavita, and Thao here joining us. So why don't we start with some introductions? I'll turn to Pavita to tell us a little bit about yourself, your program, and where you are in your journey here.
Sure. So my name is Pavita. I am a second-year doctoral student in health education here at TC. I just started my second year. It's been exactly a year that I've been at TC. I absolutely love it here. In addition to being a doctoral student, I am also a graduate writing fellow along with beautiful Kelly and our lovely and talented supervisor Meredith. I am the executive director of a nonprofit organization called Girls Health Ed, and I am also a two-time author of poetry books.
Wow. So your second year in the doctoral program,
Yep.
you work full-time in this role as the executive director of Girls Health Ed. And didn't you just arrive from California like a couple hours ago?
I did indeed. Just a typical day in the life. I'm a wanderer, and that's a...
And tell us, what were you doing in California?
Well, I was mostly just enjoying spring break.
Okay. So this was not a conference presentation?
It wasn't a conference presentation, but the week before I went to California, I was doing a conference presentation.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being here today after a long flight, and can't wait to get into a little bit more about the conferences and everything with you too, Pavita. So thank you so much. Oh, one other, got that. I want to hear about the UN.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about the UN.
We are so going to talk about the UN.
Okay, we're going to save that one. All right, thanks, Pavita. Okay, Thao.
Thank you for having me. My name is Thao. I'm a second-year master's student majoring in Instructional Technology and Media at Teachers College. I arrived here exactly 1 year ago too, but I'm towards the end of my master journey. And,
Awesome, Thao. And I think you will be presenting very soon, right, in California.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic.
With some colleagues at a national conference.
Yeah, it will be with NASPA, Student Conference on Student Success in Higher Education.
Awesome, great. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Okay, and Kelly.
Hey everybody, my name is Kelly. I'm a fifth-year doctoral student here at Teachers College in Applied Linguistics. I study language learning is my background, so like language education is my background, and my dissertation is on the teaching of writing. In addition to that, I adjunct at a variety of places throughout the city. So I'm here at Teachers College and Adjunct, Columbia main campus, and NYU are my main spots. I mainly teach in master's in TESOL, master's in applied linguistics programs. And I did not spend my spring break anywhere too exciting, but I was in Houston for a conference. So not as fun as California. It was nice. It was warmer, which was good. Yeah, that's me.
Great, thank you, Kelly. Yeah, we're going to talk about Houston and the conference there. I know, right, you and Pavita are both fellows in the Graduate Writing Center, as Pavita mentioned. You are as well, Kelly. And aren't you doing your dissertation on writing centers? So, like, how great is that? That's your dissertation. So, can't wait to hear a little bit more about all of that. So, all right. Got it. Yeah, we'll pass the microphone. Thank you, Janelle. Yeah, pass the mic for our Zoom attendees. Great, thank you so much for that reminder. Okay, so as you can see, we have an outstanding panel here. So thank you again so much for being here. Would love to open up the conversation. I'd like to hear a little bit more about your academic journey, if anyone wants to jump in with that. Tell us about the journey. How did you end up here at Teachers College in the programs that you're currently studying? What did that look like?
Thank you.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I am both the executive director of Girls Health Ed, and I am also a poet and a published author. And a huge part of the impetus for me coming to this program, first of all, I think I always knew in the back of my head that I wanted to pursue a doctorate, but there were several things holding me back. So I'm actually about 10 years out of my master's now. A few kind of concerns that I had, or the barriers that I was placing for myself were, oh my God, I am interested in so many things, but I'm not so deeply passionate enough about one thing that I can see myself studying it so intently for 5 years, which, can feel like the rest of your life. I was also thinking, am I gonna lose all of my flexibility if I come into a doctoral program? Teachers College has defied all of those barriers for me. I actually looked at this exact program at TC right in the midst of pandemic, and then I quickly let it go because, again, all of those fears in my head were essentially serving as barriers. But then I just had some things that were happening in my personal life that just all made it feel like maybe this is the right step to take, and maybe this is exactly the right time for me to take it. I won't go into too much detail, but it's actually really fascinating the ways in which my academic journey has mirrored my personal journey and also some of my family's personal journey as well. So both of my parents are actually Columbia alumni. I found out that I got into TC the weekend of my dad's birthday, so I gave him that surprise. I actually didn't tell anybody that I was applying. I did it very impulsively, and then when I found out, I'm like, this is just too serendipitous. So, there was all of that going on. I love this place so deeply because there are a few places there are a few academic places I feel that are also equally nurturing, that feel like a community, that really do feel like an extended family. As Meredith and Kelly can attest, I find my comfort at the Writing Center. I find my comfort in my department. My faculty feels like my extended family. I feel so nurtured and so supported. And as I've come here, I've learned that you don't have to be so passionately and intently focused on just one thing. This is just one phase of your life. It's not the end all and be all. In fact, it's just the beginning. And if you allow yourself to be just open to wherever that academic journey goes, you never know what other opportunities that's going to open up for you in the future. And so that's the part that I'm just really, really loving right now. But when I was applying to TC, I was really looking for a space where I could combine my love for the work that I'm doing at Girls Health Ed, the health education, the girls empowerment, the gender equality, with my love for the creative arts and the storytelling. And I feel like TC and my program and the Writing Center and just the community that I've built here have really exposed me to so many ways that I can do that, and I'm so excited for what's to come with that.
Great, thanks for that, Pavita. In the Girls Health Ed, I'm so curious.
Yeah.
So your elevator pitch for what is Girls Health Ed?
Essentially, our mission is to advance gender equality by fostering healthy, informed, and empowered decision-making in adolescent girls and young women, particularly those from low-income, underserved communities. And we have programs both here in the US and internationally in Kenya. And the way that we go about achieving this mission is by providing medically accurate, gender-transformative, intersectional, comprehensive health and sexuality education. So, during puberty, during adolescence, this is a time when, as I'm sure you all remember, every single one of us exhibited a drop in confidence during that time. What research finds is that by the time they reach young adulthood, young men are more likely to get that confidence back, whereas young women are not. And this leads to a gender confidence gap throughout the lifespan, which is putting women, girls and young women behind, academically, mental health-wise, professionally. And as it turns out, a country's economic well-being is directly tied to the health and education of its girls and women. So the theory of change and kind of the premise behind the work that we do is if we're able to intervene at this critical juncture of development, namely during adolescence, and provide these girls and young women with the tools to love themselves and take care of themselves, not only are we improving physical health outcomes in the short term, but we're also improving physical and mental health in the long term, and essentially giving these girls and young women the tools to change social and cultural norms that are perpetuating gender inequality, and thus allowing them to lift themselves and entire communities out of poverty and adverse situations.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that great work that you're doing. Thank you. Kelly or Thao, anything else about your academic journey? Anything that you would like to tell us?
Okay. So for me, it's slightly different. Like a few years ago, I would never think that I would go pursuing a graduate degree. I'm a first-gen student from a developing country, and the idea of doing research or pursuing higher education is very foreign to most people. And I was very privileged to be here on Fulbright scholarship by the US government in partnership with Vietnam's government. And I think it's always been a non-linear path for me. I resonate so much when Pavita says she had a lot of interest in a lot of different things. I guess for me, it's also the curiosity with a lot of topics that led me to start asking questions, starting to dig deeper into research to find out solutions to problems and uplift other people using the power of education.
Thank you, Thao. And right, a Fulbright scholar from Vietnam, and I bet an aspiring doctoral student someday, right?
Someday, yeah.
And so I'm so glad that you're on the panel as a master's student. I know we have master's students in attendance here who want to know, and so would love to hear like if that is something that you're also thinking about and how you're preparing yourself for possibly to be a doctoral student as a master's student right now. So anyways, would love for you to think about that. Or
I do think about that a lot, but I think at the same time, whether I pursued a doctoral or not, the skills will still transfer, even if I work in industry.
Yeah.
I think in essence, it's all about asking the right question or asking new questions
Yeah.
when you're doing research, about critically evaluating information, about gathering evidence to support certain belief or your solution to a problem, and eventually you're adding to make either new knowledge or solving a problem. So I think whether I pursue a doctorate or not,
Sure.
all these things will.
You're keeping your options open.
I am.
Yeah,
I
for
am.
sure. Awesome. Thanks, Thao. Kelly, anything about your journey that you would like to share? And now I said I'm not going to have everybody answer my question, but they all
quick.
They all are.
I'll be
Yeah.
quick.
it's
I think
okay.
the only thing I would really share is, I mean, my research journey started when I was an undergrad. I had a professor who helped advise me on my my undergraduate thesis, and she was actually a TC alum, Rhea Numa Azmi, in I think anthropology and education. She advised me on my thesis, and I did some research with her. And my first ever conference presentation was like at my school with her. And so I think it's just, I keep going back to the importance of mentors, and she was, I think, the first research mentor for me. And then now at TC, I did my master's here as well, and now at TC as a doctoral student, especially with learning the ropes with things like conference presentations where there's not a course on it, there's not a class on this. It's a lot of figuring things out as you go along, and I've found that finding a couple of people, whether it's other students or whether it's faculty members or other people in the school as mentors, and that can kind of show you the ropes, has been really helpful for me. And yeah, I'll just share that.
Oh, great. Great. Thank you, Kelly. So I want to get into the question then about conferences, because some of you have just recently presented, or you're about to present or going to present. So would like to hear about your most recent experiences with either presenting, or if you haven't quite yet done the presentation, maybe think about like how you are preparing for that presentation. Anybody want to talk about maybe recent? I know, Kelly, you just did one in Houston. Tell us what that was all about.
Sure. I presented at a conference in Houston called American Association for Applied Linguistics, or AAAL. What can I say about it? In terms of preparing, I can talk a little bit about like my process for preparing for the presentation. For me, I think probably many of us are teachers, and so the actual standing up in front of people has never been too scary for me, but the planning is usually where I get a lot of the anxiety. So there's a lot of prep work that goes in ahead of time. For example, for this conference, I presented it to some of my classmates a couple of times. I shared it with my mom, make sure it made sense to her. So I went through multiple iterations of my presentation before I ultimately presented it at the conference. And I think what helps me leading up to the presentation and then during the presentation is just to know that the people who are at the talks are usually people that had many presentations to choose from during that time, and they chose yours. So they're really there just to learn, and they're really excited to be there. And so that usually helps me when I'm preparing for conferences, just to know the people that are there are really excited to just learn from you. They're not assessing you, or they're not, evaluating you or any way. And I got really good questions. This was part of my dissertation research that I presented, and I had a couple of really helpful audience questions that have now sparked other directions of thought for my dissertation write-up. So I found that to be a very helpful experience. But, yeah.
And did you have like a collaborator or a mentor kind of helping you along the way? Did you present with anybody else or all by yourself?
It was all by myself. As I mentioned, it was part of my dissertation, so it was just my own work. My advisor, in general, she has given us a lot of help on our presentations, like feedback on presentations in the past. So sometimes we'll present them in our doctoral seminars, and she'll give us feedback. But no, this was all by myself this time around.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Congratulations. Do you have any other presentations coming up?
Not too soon. No, nothing.
Okay.
Nothing exciting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Anybody else want to talk about your most recent presentations, or maybe one that you're preparing for?
The most recent one for me was actually October last year. It was a conference called Learning Science for Graduate Student in Iowa. Very friendly, student-friendly conference where most of us are doctoral students or master's students majoring in education. I think one of the major things that helped me preparing for my topic is to talk a lot about it with different people, especially people who are not, doesn't have knowledge of the topic that I'm about to present, so I can communicate it in the most comprehensible way to even like non-specialized audience.
Awesome.
Great. Yeah, so I love what Kelly said about mentors. Mentors are extremely important. And one thing that I'll actually say about that is when we think of mentors, don't just limit yourself to your own department. You can find mentors outside of your department, and especially at a place like TC where the work is so interdisciplinary and collaborative. I think it's so important to, cast a wide net when you're looking for mentors. So that's actually a great segue into my most recent conference presentation, which was actually just a couple of weeks ago at the annual United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. And so I presented on behalf of Girls Health Ed, but it was actually a collaborative project with one of my mentors here at TC, Professor Orly Athan, in clinical psychology. And she's the faculty advisor for the Maternal and Reproductive Psychology Lab here at TC. And so this was as I mentioned, a joint project. So Professor Athan's lab, one of the topics that they are exploring is this emerging concept called reproductive identity. Reproductive identity is an emerging concept that will hopefully be seen along the lines of other categories of identity, whether that be sexual orientation, gender identity. Essentially, it has to do with how one self-identifies in relation to the question of if, when, and how to realize parenthood, or not realize parenthood, or have a family, or however you want to think of such a concept. So Professor Athan's lab has tested how this concept has been received and understood by sexuality educators, but to date, until recently, it hadn't been, tested on actual students or youth. And so we at Girls Health Ed essentially piloted a reproductive identity curriculum with our youth in Kenya. And what we presented at the UN conference was the results of this pilot study on how these young ladies in Kenya are making sense of the term reproductive identity and how they see and how they see and imagine their own reproductive futures in light of the social and cultural influences that have impacted them.
Excellent. Thank you. So, I mean, it seems like all of you are very comfortable with public speaking. You probably would not even have wanted to be on this panel if that was something that you were really concerned about. But that's hard though. It's not. It doesn't always come naturally, to everyone. It can cause lots of anxiety, and we all have tools and ways to like get over that. Anyways, sometimes somebody might be really anxious inside, but you have a way to present that they don't even know that that's how you're feeling inside. So I just wondered, again, you all seem expert at it. So how did you build your confidence in public speaking? And do you have any advice? And if you are nervous inside, tell us, because we don't think you are. No, you don't have to tell us. But yeah, anybody have any thoughts on that? How did you gain confidence in public speaking and standing in front of, especially at a conference, and preparing something like that and then being able to do it?
I guess I already mentioned, I think one of the things that helps me is like knowing who my audience is and knowing that the audience really just is there to learn from you. And I think as a teacher, I just think about like I'm teaching, and that has kind of helped me. But what I do, I don't know if I would recommend this to everybody. So I think I think you would want to figure out like what level of preparation is helpful for you, and specifically like what level of memorization is helpful for you. So I don't know if anyone knows who Tim Urban is. He did a TED Talk several years ago about procrastination, but he has this blog, and he wrote this blog about his process for doing the TED, like preparing for the TED Talk. And on his blog, he talks about like there's these different levels at which you could memorize your talk, and there's like winging it over on this end of the spectrum, which I probably wouldn't recommend you do. And then somewhere in the middle where you have like a structure, but then you just talk, like you don't have full sentences, and then there's like scripting it. And when you script it, you could either like read from a paper, or you might just like have it fully memorized. So for me, I usually like fully script and memorize 100%. I don't think everybody does that. But so for me, like, especially if it's just like a 15-minute talk, I just script everything and I memorize it 100%, but I don't look. So if you practice, for me, if I practice it long enough, I can make it sound like it's coming kind of naturally, but really it's all in my head. Like he calls it happy birthday level memorization. And so for the conferences that I'm very nervous about, or the ones that kind of feel high stakes, I just memorize it 100%. That does not work for everyone. But I think there was a process early on where you kind of have to figure out what works for you, or hear from other people about their strategies, and try for yourself what works. So that's how I prepare for it. Is just memorize it and practice for timings as well. So I think if they're strict about, I'd say most conferences are pretty strict about timings. Like if you have 20 minutes, you have 20 minutes, and you want time for questions. So I would practice it for timing so that you really hit the timing mark, and that you actually do have time for questions. I think sometimes people go over and they don't have time for questions, but I have found that questions are like the reason I present at conferences, is to get questions from audience members. So if I prepare so that I'm really good with ending at the right time, I'll end up having time for a lot of good, helpful questions to push my research forward. So yeah, that's
a great strategy, actually memorizing everything and then go. Yeah, and timing it. Great. Any other strategies?
I think Kelly partly mentioned it, but assume good intentions from your audience is another thing I found helpful. I have huge imposter syndrome as a first-gen student who self-taught myself research. We did learn a bit of that in undergrad, but not very in-depth into like research methodology, how to construct critical questions and stuff like that. So I pretty much self-taught myself everything, and like my voice still breaks from time to time now when I do public speaking. But I think it's helpful to experience friendly audience and assume that people are not there to judge you. People are there to help you with your topics. A lot of people have come and shared their experiences and how they resonate with the topics that I've done research on as well, and that's been extremely helpful in alleviating anxiety for me.
And yeah, I mean, I think just to kind of bow tie what these lovely ladies have already said, at the end of the day, like, yes, you want to be professional, but at the end of the day, that remember that we're all just humans. You know, everyone in the audience is a human and you're a human. And people are more than anything going to connect with your authenticity. So be professional, but be yourself and have confidence in that person who is presenting, because you're awesome, and everyone in the audience knows you're awesome.
Great advice. Great advice. I mean, yeah, we all do have our own techniques for that. Yeah, I really appreciated kind of hearing your how you've approached that. And I know you've been obviously successful because you've had some great presentations and conference acceptances and everything. So I'd like to think about, you know, you're all doing research at Teachers College, actively involved with some research projects. At what moment did something click, or did you think like this could be a conference presentation, or this could be, you know, obviously something that I want to take further? Did someone encourage you? Was that something on your own that you just sort of, so would like to hear if anybody wants to talk about that process at all. Like how you leverage your research at Teachers College, and at what point did you feel like this could really be a conference presentation?
Honestly, when I feel like I hit the wall at the thing that I'm doing, I think it's a signal of there's a gap in knowledge or a gap in solution for the problem. And that's motivated me to like dig deeper into finding the answer. So one example is my upcoming presentation at NASPA is on first-gen financial literacy. I work at GSLD as an administrative fellow, and I'm in charge of running the first-gen initiative. And as I run the program, I realized that there haven't been much done on, well, there has been a few initiatives aiming at improving financial literacy for first-gen undergrads, but not so much for graduate student. And graduate students have to like take out loans. They don't have like that many scholarships anymore to finance the study, and that poses a gap that I wanted to uncover more, and that inspires my topic for the presentation.
Right. Anybody else? What was that moment that you thought this really could and maybe should be something more than this class project or something?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I had a single moment. I think I could just say that I've tried to, in many of my courses, we did like mini empirical studies or analyses. And so I think my professor encouraged me to do something with it, whether publish it or present it. And I've tried to, I guess, with most of my empirical projects in my courses to turn them into something and to share them somehow. So whether it's like you could do, like, it doesn't have to be a formal presentation. There's also more informal, like a poster presentation, or, and maybe we'll talk about this later, but there's like other media through which you could share your work. And so I think that's kind of like realizing like there's something here to share. How can I share it? One way might be to share it through a presentation. So I've tried to, I guess, turn most of my papers into some kind of presentation, but I don't think there was a specific moment for me. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there was a specific moment for me either. I think the very new and emerging nature of the work that I'm doing, the very exploratory nature of the work that I'm doing means that, it's innovative, it's groundbreaking. So there's always going to be opportunities to present about it. I think perhaps in contrast to what my colleagues have talked about, I think maybe I've worked a little bit backwards, where I've identified the kind of spaces that I want to be in, the kinds of conferences that I want to be presenting in, and then kind of work backwards from there, like knowing, okay, this is what they're really going to value at this particular conference. How can I kind of leverage my existing work to fit with the goals of the conference?
I'll just add that it also like often doesn't have to be a completed project. Like it could be a work in progress, and sometimes conferences, like the best time to bring your work to conferences is when it's a work in progress, not when it's a completed work, because you want to get like people's feedback on it. Yeah, I'll just add that.
And get people excited about it.
So it seems like the conference presentations are important to all of you. Why? Can you talk about that? Like why? And do you also think like, is this a recommendation that you would have to any doctoral student to be continually thinking about preparing possibly or submitting for conference presentations?
I'll give the boring answer. The boring answer is that it's important, like if you want to be in academia, it is like one way that it's part of how you involve yourself in the community, I think. And it's something that I resisted for a long time because I feel much more comfortable presenting my ideas in writing. I would much rather do that. And so I did resist it for a while. I think it's just something that if you do, to build up your CV and all of that. So that's the boring answer. Maybe my colleagues might have a more exciting answer, but it is like part of being a part of the academic community and getting feedback on your work and sharing your work.
I think you mentioned earlier that conference is fun. For me, that's always the fun element of going to conference as well, of like meeting and networking with people in the field. I guess also I'm at the beginning stage of my journey as well. So for me, it's fascinating to hear what people are doing in the field, what emerging ideas are coming up. So.
So in case it was any surprise to anybody, I love talking. I love talking about myself. I love talking about my work. Yeah, no, I won't lie. It's fun for me. It's fun for me, and I think I'll take any opportunity to just put myself out there because it really is empowering. Not only do okay, yes, from a purely ego perspective, yes, I enjoy it. However, I think the message that I would love to share with all of my colleagues out there is that you have something really important and valuable to offer. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there because there is somebody in the audience or, somebody in your network or someone you don't even know is in your network yet who's going to benefit from what you have to say. So
Great.
You're not only doing a favor to yourself, you're doing a favor to everybody.
So how do you hear about the conferences in your field? Right, that's one question, and then I guess the second part to that question is, is there such thing as like student-friendly conferences? Anyone want to grab this?
Student-friendly conferences.
Yeah, I can speak about the student-friendly part. I think there are a lot of students, a lot of conferences that targeted graduate students, and you can search with the keyword graduate student conference. I think there's one coming up also from the same learning society that I was in, coming up in Buffalo, if I'm not mistaken. So yes, there are conferences that will accept first-time presenter or work in progress or preliminary ideas. It doesn't have to be like a full-fledged work like Kelly mentioned. And I think network mentors, I got a lot of information about conferences through my professors at TC. It's important to indicate that you're interested in doing research and doing conference presentations. So when professors read your paper, for example, I get one email from my professor saying that, hey, you should submit your assignment to this conference.
Great.
Yeah.
You covered a lot. I'll just add, in addition to like asking your mentors about what conferences are available, there's probably listservs. So I'm on like listservs for different like major organizations in my field. If you can get on those listservs, and if you don't know, maybe ask your professors or advisors which listservs to get on, then you'll get emails of like upcoming events and conferences. So it's also, you can also find information like on Twitter or X, like if you follow certain organizations, they'll post those things. So I think that's all I have to say on that. Yeah, listservs is where you sometimes see them, and asking people.
Great. Good advice.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything different to add. I think having done the work that I'm doing with Girls Health Ed now for over a decade, I've just come to be familiar with what are the common conferences in the space. But I think asking around, don't be afraid to ask professors, mentors, colleagues, classmates. I think I've also found out a lot about conferences just through Facebook ads and social media ads. So, yeah. And LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, yeah,
Yeah, you
LinkedIn for
see
sure.
people
Yeah.
posting about how they're presenting at certain conferences, and I was like, click follow after I saw their announcements.
Okay, great. Good strategy. And so, okay, so there's one thing about, right? So you've talked about like how you find conferences, networking, connecting, preparing, the strategies that you use. Logistically, right? It costs money. You're traveling. You might be missing class to get to some of these things. So how do you make those pieces all come together? And are those barriers? And if so, like how have you overcome them? You don't need to go into all of the specifics, like, but you know, I'm just really curious, right? That are there scholarships? Are there fellowships? Are there grants? Are there things that you can apply for that have offset the cost? Right? We heard California. Well, no, California was fun.
Yeah.
You know, Houston. I think Thao, you're going to California for a future conference. So it's like these are faraway places. So how do you do all this? And are there some funding streams or opportunities someplace?
Yeah, so I think here at TC there are several scholarship opportunities for conferences. I mean, occasionally you'll see them in the emails. You know, the vice provost's office, they'll send you know, emails about grant opportunities for conferences or grant opportunities for presentations. We're very lucky in the GSLD office. We also have opportunities for professional development funds, which can be used for conferences. Last year I got to use my Pro Devo funds to present at a literary conference in Louisville, Kentucky, which was awesome. Through just because of my work, we also have a budget set aside for conferences and professional development opportunities. So I've been able to leverage those. In terms of other logistics, so for example, being a student, working full-time, and then, you know, having all of these other extracurricular activities, sometimes I can't be in every single space at once, so maybe I'll, you know, pass certain opportunities on to my colleagues, whether that be my classmates or others who are working with me at Girls Health Ed, for example. And I think that there's something to be said about the importance of collaboration. So, you know, when you're applying, if you're going into academia, you're applying for jobs, I think there's a lot of emphasis on, you know, being the first author, the lead presenter, but they also like to see you being second author or third author, you know, so because that's an indication that you know how to collaborate and that you're not just a diva, if you will, right? So I think there's really something to be said that even if you personally can't be in every single space, there's something to be said for sharing the love and kind of opening up those opportunities for your colleagues and allowing them, you know, allowing them the space to shine in certain conferences, if you will.
Good advice. Yeah, anyone else have any ideas for funding or physically getting there and yeah. And maybe some of these conferences also have student discounts and things.
Yes, so do capitalize on the
Okay.
student discounts when you can. I think a lot of conferences also offer discount for volunteers. So like the one I went to, I think they offer like discount packages or lodging accommodation for people who volunteer with checking in for the event. So that's one source you can look at. The upcoming conference in California also have like scholarship for members and then scholarship for people to travel to the place. So definitely check in to the website, email, ask the organizer about fundings if you can.
I guess the only thing I'll add is sometimes, two things. One, some conferences are hybrid, especially nowadays. And I think a lot of conferences are moving towards making them hybrid because they are more accessible, because conferences are, even when you do get funding, especially like in the education field, they're certainly cost prohibitive. So some are hybrid where you might be able to still participate through Zoom. And different size conferences might have different kinds of opportunities. So like some smaller like boutique conferences might have more opportunities for like a couple of student paper awards or something. And I think they do that at bigger conferences too, but I'm just thinking a conference I did a couple of years ago, I was able to get everything covered because they were giving out like small student awards. And so looking at different size conferences as well. For many reasons, you might want to look at different size conferences because you're going to get different things out of a smaller, more intimate setting and like a bigger kind of convention like conference. But that's one way, or that's one reason to consider different sizes too.
Great advice. Great advice. Yeah, you're all very resourceful how you've made this happen. I did want to mention that besides some of the things that you've said where TC different offices sometimes can help, there is a provost grant for conferences. So to assist students with going to conferences, presenting at conferences. And we were just looking, the next application cycle for that particular grant is April 15th. That opens up. There's a short window of time that students can submit and apply for that. I think it closes on the 19th. So so again, it's open for 4 days to submit. And if you go on the TC Next website, you can read a little bit more about it. And the reason it's a short window of time is there's different cycles for conferences and the conference season. So for anybody in the audience or on Zoom who might be having something coming up in this upcoming conference season, this cycle of April 15th to April 19th might be your time to submit for that grant that comes through the Provost Fund. So just wanted to highlight that and mention that as well. And it's a modest stipend, but it can assist with some travel and maybe a conference fee or something. So I wanted to mention that to you. Okay, gosh, time for a few more questions here. So for those students who might be just in the beginning stages to think about presenting at a conference, any advice you would give them?
I'll give a quick suggestion. If like for the process of applying to conferences or like submitting abstracts, if you can find people, maybe students who have done it before, students who have been to this conference before, and get models of abstract submissions, have other people read your abstracts. So if it's the process of getting accepted, models can be really helpful. And like you've been spending a lot of time with your research, so when you put it into abstract form, it may make sense to you, but it might not make sense to anyone else. So getting other people to read it, we could plug the Writing Center for that if you're working on abstract. So that's one piece of advice I'll give.
Yeah, double plug for the Writing Center. Come to us. Other than that, I will just reiterate what I've already said. Be yourself and have confidence in yourself and know what you have to offer.
Okay. One more. Sure.
Consider the conference theme. I don't think we mentioned that yet, but different conferences each year might have a different theme as well. And so like when you're preparing your materials, you might have a paper that you can frame in a slightly different way to fit that conference theme. So be aware of like all of like the way you talk about your research, you might just like tweak it a little bit so that it kind of fits with the theme. So just be aware of like any of the conference information, like the theme, the abstract requirements and all of that.
Great, really, really great advice. Conference theme. I was also thinking like, don't forget then as soon as you're finished, putting it on your CV or your resume, like right away. Something that I've learned over the years from many of our faculty colleagues here at Teachers College, like academics are constantly updating their CVs. Like they have it just open or, it's just all the time. And I think to your point, Kelly, or just earlier, kind of if you're preparing for that life in academia, it's really important to just keep that as current as possible. And so I just remember one time sitting in a faculty member's office in TC and and they thought of something and they're like, oh, I gotta go update my CV. I'm like, they have it right on their desktop and they were added, just asked to be on a committee or something or giving a presentation or a talk someplace. So they were like, I can't forget to do that. So I don't know if you all are doing that as well as you're preparing for a possible, maybe a life in academia, but is that something that is really important to you? To just kind of keep it up to date?
Yeah, for sure. I
Yeah.
also update my CV. I have to update my CV and resume, especially at this point when I'm
do,
about to
yeah.
graduate. It's important to get the words out there, not only on your CV, but I think social media is a good channel.
Sure.
Because academia doesn't just read your CV, right? They also looked at your LinkedIn, and a lot of people see what you wrote on Twitter. So
Sure. Great. Awesome. Does anyone have, speaking of social media, I know Thao, you just brought that up, but does anyone have any success in using social media to like find a conference or network, or anybody have a success story on that at all, or any recommendation? Or maybe not.
Yeah, I have a lot of luck finding conferences through social media ads actually. So the literary festival where I presented in Louisville, I just found a Facebook ad for it and I clicked apply and Meredith helped me get there for free.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, thanks to Meredith.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Meredith and Fanny.
Great. I mean, I think, right? So we are at, wow, just at almost 5 o'clock, 2 minutes till 5. We want to make sure that we have some time for the informal networking part of this program. So I'm not sure.
Q&A.
Q&A. Do we have time for Q&A?
Is there anything on Zoom? What'd you ask?
Yes. Okay. Do any of our Zoom participants have any questions? I think we have time for a couple questions. So any questions for our panelists?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you use AI to prepare for your presentations?
Good question.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, you asked, have any of us used AI to prepare for conferences or presentations? You have?
yes, I think there's a lot of tools out there. And I also study education technology, so I need to be updated on what's happening out there. So I've used a few different tools, not to generate writing, but to grapple with the keywords, also to scope out what are some eminent words that are in the field. So there are a few tools like, I think Elicit. When you type in the keyword, it can like list out several papers on the topics that you wanted. It can summarize, it can present like counter arguments as well on the topics. It's pretty fascinating.
And do you use it visually also to generate images based on your data?
Ooh, interesting. I haven't used that though.
Right.
Good question. Are there any other questions?
Have any of you all spoken on a topic specifically about diversity and I guess in relation to your topic, to your content, or been on diverse panels? Do I repeat that?
Yeah, so I think the question is, have any of us spoken about diversity specifically in relation to our topics or been on diverse panels? I suppose so. I mean, just given the very nature of the work that I personally am doing, right, where I'm in the gender equality space and also the mental health space, I think those are two aspects of diversity that often go underplayed. I think I think that there's a movement towards recognizing what diversity looks like in all of its forms. I think if we just focus on kind of the physical aspects of diversity or only what we can see in front of us, then we're completely missing the mark. And so that's oftentimes something that I have to remind other people that I'm collaborating with, like when they say we want a diverse panel, sometimes I'll say, let's, and I can completely appreciate that, because I think we're operating in an environment these days that's very optics centered, and if you don't quote unquote see diversity, it can reflect badly on your organization or whatnot. But I think, again, we need to be really clear on what do we actually mean when we're talking about diversity, because there's so much that's beyond the surface that you might not know, that you simply can't tell just by looking at a person. So for example, I try to be very open about my mental health struggles, but perhaps that's not something that anybody would know, right, just by looking at me, or they wouldn't know like the entire set of experiences that I've had just by looking at me. So yeah, I think that's one part of the question, and then yeah, I think just kind of expanding our definition of what diversity is.
Pavita?
Any resources or tips for improving public speaking skills?
I think the question was any resources or tips for improving public speaking skills. Got it? Okay.
Practice.
Practice, yeah.
Any references or books or?
Yeah, any go-to resource that you've used besides practice, memorize, like Kelly?
They shared out earlier what they were, their tips about, memorizing and, yeah, I think that was.
Yeah. Practicing with the timing of it.
I don't have any books or like websites, but I teach a lot of language classes and ESL classes, and a lot of our classes, when we prepare for presentations, I share, like, we watch TED Talks and we analyze TED Talks, and I have found that has actually helped me as in my own like academic life. Just we talk about like what does their gesture and body language look like and things like that. So I guess that would be, if I was going to turn that into a tip, it would be like watch presentations that look at people who you find are good presenters and analyze like what they do that is impactful and what do they do that makes them a good presenter, and then practice. I think that's all I could say. I think.
I would say find some, right, like sounds like find some great colleagues that you can practice with, maybe who can also give you some feedback, maybe know something about the subject area. And if that works, I feel like that would really help you prepare as well.
I think it's also important to like find your own way of public speaking.
Sure.
Like Pavita mentioned, you can watch somebody on TED Talk and the style might be super appealing to you, but there's no way you can get into that. So like find the sweet spot of what you want to
Like
be
what's
and who
gonna
you
work
actually.
for
yeah.
you. Got it. Okay. Great. How about one more question here? Yeah.
It seems that people in academia need to like have a lot of energy to connect people or like to attending conferences. But I'm wondering, like, do you think that energy is like necessary for people? Like, for example, we have to be extrovert to navigate. Or, like, do you have any suggestions?
That's a really, so the question was, like how do you modulate or moderate your energy, especially if you're an introvert? What advice would you give to introverts who are going into conference spaces? I think for me personally, this not only applies to conferences, but anything and everything that you're doing in your life. Make sure that you prioritize self-care. I think that's the only way that I've been able to be successful at everything that I'm doing, is because I try to make myself a priority, and that's the only way that I can bring my best self into everything that I do. And and at conferences, especially if your school or your work or your whoever is sponsoring, or maybe you personally, you're putting in a lot of money into the experience, and so there's a tendency that you want to feel like you have to do everything in order to get the most out of it. I would say that's not necessarily my way of operating. So maybe instead of going to the networking happy hour, I'll take a nap, and then maybe tomorrow I'll go to the networking happy hour, or maybe tomorrow I'll try to identify some key people that I want to talk to during lunch. So my personal advice would say, like, yes, be strategic about what you want to do, but don't necessarily feel like you have to do and be everything, because again, just like I was saying at the beginning of my talk, this is just the beginning. See what other opportunities it can open up, and don't put so much pressure on yourself to try to do everything right now.
Great
I have
advice.
one thing, only because I'm very introverted and I really did not like conferences. I'm not saying I love them right now. I don't have as much fun as I think some of you guys have at conferences. But for me, I was less nervous about the presentation, more nervous about the small talk and all of like the networking, which is something that I think I have always really struggled with. So I do a lot of, I prepare my elevator pitch a lot. So not my presentation, but like how I'm going to talk about my work. Because people will say, what do you do? Where do you go to school? What do you study? So I prepare that in advance. And I do a bit of research. This might sound a little weird, but sometimes like I go in thinking I'm going to talk to 3 people, and sometimes I know what people those are. Like there's a couple of people that I really want to network with, and so I plan that out in advance, or I plan out like I'm going to go to this talk and this talk in advance, and I can do a little bit of background work on that talk or like on that faculty member that I really want to meet. And so I can't be as spontaneous as other people can be, and I think that's something that you figure out for yourself. Like I will never be a very spontaneous networker, and you kind of figure out what works for you. So that's what works for me. But
Great question. Thank you so much for really all of the questions. But yeah, and thanks for sharing your experiences with us. I think we've all been. I mean, this has really been a treat, really special panel to hear of your experiences, your successes, your fears, your anxieties, just really your authentic selves. So I appreciate showing up and participating, contributing. The rest of the program is really structured for the informal networking. So I know we can do that with those in the room. And I really appreciate those online who have engaged with us today too. So thank you so much for being here. And please join me in thanking our great panelists, Pavita, Thao, and Kelly, for sharing with us here today. And we wish you continued success in all of the work that you're doing. And you really make all of us proud as representatives of the college, and kind of going out there doing this great work that you're doing. So just continue, and we're also proud of you too, and can't wait to see everything that you all accomplish. So thank you very much. Okay, thank you all. All right, we'll go into our informal networking here. Thank you.